Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about some news for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom that appears to be confirming multiple theories we've had about this game, and so there's some pretty cool implications here, and that's what we're going to be breaking down today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So what has gone down is that we've gotten the official rating for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom from the ESRB, the Entertainment Software Rating Board. The game is rated everyone 10 and up, fantasy violence. That part comes as no surprise, but it's here in the rating summary where there are some very interesting things said. This is an adventure game in which players assume the role of Zelda as she attempts to dispel rifts throughout Hyrule and rescue Link. From a 3/4 overhead perspective, players explore various environments while fighting stylized enemies, example, humans, creatures. As Link, players use a sword and arrows to defeat enemies. Zelda can use a magic wand to summon creatures, examples wind-up knights, pig soldiers, slime, for battle. Some enemies can be defeated by being set on fire, other creatures dissolve into mist when defeated. Battle sequences are somewhat frenetic, with several enemies attacking fighting at once. And that is the summary from the ESRB on The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. And there's one big headline that's been going around, that this rating right here confirms that Link is indeed playable in The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Now, I made a video about this a few weeks ago. I talked about how I theorized that Link will be playable at some points throughout Echoes of Wisdom, possibly in the beginning, but I even think later into the game. I think that at some point in the adventures of Princess Zelda in this game, we will encounter Link, and there will be a way to play as him again. Now, my speculation is that what's going to happen is that Link will be made playable as an Echo. So, if you take a look at the key art, you'll see that Link looks kind of evil. I think at some point we're going to do battle with an evil Link, defeat him, obtain the Echo, and then use that, but this will be an advanced Echo that will require a lot of resources, so it would be late game, and then perhaps by the end of the game, the actual Link and Princess Zelda will work together to defeat the ultimate evil, and that's kind of how the game would work. Maybe he's playable in the beginning, maybe he's playable in the end, but what I'm most confident in is a playable Echo that represents Link, but perhaps the evil version of him or something similar. Now, the confirmation from the rating board here is where they say, as Link, players use a sword and arrows to defeat enemies. So, it could just be that they're referring to the opening scene where we see Link doing battle with some Dark Nuts and then Ganon. And he does use his sword, and he does use his bow, but we don't see the bow used on any enemies, we just see it used on the crystal encasing Princess Zelda. So there's a possible implication here that we will see more of the bow in the beginning, or perhaps simply later on with actual gameplay. But what I think should be noted here is that they're not literally saying that Link is playable. It could just maybe be extrapolated from the way it's being worded that that's the case. Let's remind ourselves that this is a rating summary. This is depicting different elements for parents and others to be aware of the kind of things they should be prepared for when going into this game. That way they're not running into something that isn't safe for whoever's playing that game. Perhaps a kid that would be sensitive to some of the elements in this game. It's rated E10 and up, so most people are probably okay with this, but there are some who might not be for those of an even younger age. And so that's the point of the ESRB or other ratings. They're just trying to detail if this game is safe for younger audiences. And so they will talk about Link using a sword and arrow because we have already seen proof that Link uses a sword and arrow when dealing with evil. But what's interesting is that they say players use a sword and arrows to defeat enemies as Link. So, based off how this is written, it is telling us that we will use a sword and arrows as Link to defeat enemies. Now, is it possible that this is maybe slightly poorly written? It's possible. But considering the theories we've already had on a playable Link, this to me just adds more fuel to that fire. I do think that it's very likely that Link will be playable in some way. Perhaps in the way I described, perhaps in some sort of post-game content. I think there are a few ways this can be done, and it wouldn't be that complicated because we've already seen Link playable in this form in prior games, like Link's Awakening Remake, which uses essentially the same graphics engine and art style, and they had Link there, so this wouldn't be some sort of huge development effort to have this kind of element to the game. But what I would like to stress here is that this is not 100% confirmation. Yes, it looks like in the beginning Link is playable, but we don't see a UI, it could just be a cutscene. That all said, I still theorize that it's going to happen, and now I'm more confident in the theory than ever before. It seems fairly likely. But that's not the only theory of mine that seems to have been confirmed by this rating summary. So even earlier in the description, here they say, you assume the role of Zelda as she attempts to dispel rifts throughout Hyrule and rescue Link. So when we take a look at the trailer, in the beginning parts, Princess Zelda escapes that tomb or dungeon, and we see like the purple dimensional rifts start to consume that part of the game. But from what we can tell, the rest of Hyrule has not been taken over by these rifts yet. There is a second event that happens after this point where the rifts appear and consume different parts of the land, including some different people. And as we also seen throughout the gameplay, we see these purple dimensional looking like environments where clearly Princess Zelda is doing some sort of challenge or mini dungeon. And my theory has been that these rifts we see throughout the map are these environments, and what we're going to do is take on these challenges and beat them, and thus dispelling the rift, unlocking the original part of that land of Hyrule. So if there's someone that was trapped in there, we will then release them and we can interact with them in the game, and this may even tie into how we may eventually unlock Link. But to me this makes a lot of sense, because it sort of fits a mold that we started to see with the more recent Zelda games. So there have been things about Echoes of Wisdom that remind me of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. How we have this special wand, how we can create the echoes. It's this ability that we're given very early on into the game that has a wide variety of applications. Very much in the way we can use the Sheikah Slate or the Zonai Hand in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Or even going back to A Link Between Worlds, there was an open dungeon structure. I think moving forward, Zelda progression is going to have a lot more open elements and a lot more ways to deal with different puzzles. It's not one solution per puzzle, but a variety of different ways to handle different challenges and puzzles. So that core philosophy seems to be carrying through here, and when we consider how both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were constructed with all the shrines littered throughout the world, and we would run into these, take on the challenge, I have a feeling the rifts are going to feel very similar. Except in this game, when we encounter them, once we beat it, it will be dispelled, unlocking part of the land, which I think is going to make it a lot more interesting. And seeing here for the rating summary that they use the word dispel, that pretty much confirms to us that we are getting rid of these rifts. Now, playing devil's advocate, perhaps they simply mean that Zelda's going to be taking on the task of trying to dispel all the rifts throughout the game, and that's just her mission to save the overall land of Hyrule alongside Link, and it's not so much the case that we will be going into each of these rifts individually and dispelling them one at a time. But based off how the way this is written, and based off how I think the game is going to be structured, I do feel like dispelling them one at a time is the best way to go, otherwise it wouldn't be as interesting. And it does lead me to another sort of thinking how this game is going to be open. This isn't going to be a linear Zelda game. I think some people see this style of 2D top-down Zelda and assume that it's going to play like the prior 2D top-down Zeldas. But while I think there will be some level of linearity, especially based off what we've seen of what we assume is the prologue with Link battling Ganon in the beginning of the game, I still think there's going to be a fair degree of openness, and how we progress throughout the world and deal with different challenges, well, we're going to have a lot of choice in that. Considering the primary mechanic of the echoes, that seems to be likely the case, because if there are multiple ways to solve a puzzle, then you should be able to go to any puzzle in the world and find a way to solve it with the resources at hand. Of course, I'm sure they can find some ways to create some level of barrier, or at least make it harder to do different things until you reach a certain point, but it does seem likely that this game is not going to be a linear path, but more so an open path. But what do you think? What do you make of The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom? Is it going to be this open in terms of overall exploration and your choice of direction? Are we going to be able to dispel the rifts individually similar to how we take on shrines in Breath and Tears? And will Link be playable in some way, shape, or form at some point in the game? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.